Hey guys, my name's Jeff, and I'm one of the pastors at the Lutz location. Welcome back to our series, Greater Than. Have you ever looked at your life, with its struggles, its disappointments, its detours, and just wondered, is God really at work in my life? I know I have. Personally, for me, like when I was a younger Christian, especially, whether it was work or my business or my relationships, there was just times I said, where is God? I mean, does he even care about what's going on? And maybe you've had those same questions in your life. Well, today we're going to look at the story of Joseph. He's one of my favorite all-time Bible characters. And Joseph's a guy that probably asked a lot of the same questions that you and I did. Is God really at work in our lives? So Joseph came from a big family. He had 10 older brothers. That's a crazy amount. And he probably had sisters that we don't know about. But anyway, Joseph was the favorite of his father. So much so that his father made him a coat, a multicolored coat, greater than all of his brothers. Well, you can imagine that didn't sit well with the brothers. And the family's business was shepherding, so there was a time where all the brothers were away in a far land with the herd, and Joseph's father said, hey, I need you to go check on your brothers and bring me back a report. So Joseph, being an obedient son, he goes off to find the brothers. Well, they can see him coming from a long ways away because he's got the multicolored coat, and they're still not happy about it. And they actually come up with a plan to kill Joseph. Can you imagine that? They're going to kill their own brother. Thank goodness they didn't. But what they did do is they grab a hold of him, they rough him up, and they throw him into a pit until they can decide what to do with him. Well, at the same time, a caravan was coming by with some travelers that were going down to Egypt. So the brothers decide to sell Joseph, their brother, as a slave. So they sell him, they take his coat from him, they rip it up, they dip it in blood from a lamb, and they take it back to his father, and they tell him that their brother has been killed by wild animals. Can you imagine that? He's the favorite, and he gets roughed up by a bunch of guys and thrown into a pit and left for dead? It's kind of what Michigan did to Ohio State last season. But Joseph was doing what was right, guys. He was obeying his father. He was doing everything he should, and still, terrible things are happening. Guys, sometimes life seems unfair, even when you're doing the right things. But remember this, God doesn't stop working just because things are going wrong. So there's a few things we need to know if we're going to have answers to our questions about is God working in our lives. And the second one is that God's work often seems invisible. I don't know about you guys, but there's been times in my life when I looked back after the situation was over, and I can see God's hand clearly in that situation. I couldn't feel it or see it at the time, but at the end I look back and I could see it. And the question I asked myself is, why was I worrying? Why are you worrying? Why do you worry knowing that God is at work behind the scenes? The Bible says hundreds of times, fear not. God doesn't want us to have any worry in our life. It doesn't mean we don't plan and prepare, but he does not want us to worry. Listen to what it says in Matthew 6:25. For this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body as to what you will put on it. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Guys, we shouldn't worry about anything knowing that God's in control. But let's get back to Joseph. He's thrown in a pit, sold into slavery. He ends up in Egypt in the house of Potiphar, one of the captains of the guard of Pharaoh. And we don't know how long it was, probably a couple years. He finds favor in Potiphar's eyes, and he's elevated to where he's running all of the house of Potiphar. Well, Potiphar's wife takes notice of Joseph, and she's trying to seduce him daily. She's just coming after him, and he's always saying no. But there came a day when Potiphar was gone, and it says that Potiphar's wife literally grabs Joseph by the coat and says, come on, let's do this. And Joseph, in an effort to get away, basically rips out of his coat and leaves, runs out of the house. She's so upset, she's so embarrassed that she calls out to the other servants and says, Joseph tried to rape me. Potiphar finds out, he's furious. He throws Joseph into prison. Joseph's abandoned again. But even in prison, and again, we don't know the time, probably a couple more years, Joseph finds favor with the prison guards. And he's elevated to where he's now in charge of all of the prisoners. And 2 prisoners get sent there that worked in Pharaoh's court because Pharaoh was upset with them at one point. They both had dreams, and Joseph was able to, with God's ability, interpret their dreams. And he didn't ask for anything in return except for the one man. He said, when you're released and you go back, please remember me. Tell Pharaoh about me. Get me out of this place. Well, guess what? The guy got released. He went back and he forgot about Joseph. He's abandoned again. Like everything seems to look like a failure right now. I mean, he's been up and down, and every time he goes to a new position, it's a worse position. I mean, he was the favorite son and he's thrown in a pit. He's the favorite slave and he's thrown in prison. He's the favorite prisoner and he's abandoned. Guys, it just seems like everything's going wrong, and maybe it's that way in your life. But here's what the Bible says. God was working behind the scenes. And in Genesis 39, the Lord keeps saying that he was with him. The Lord was with Joseph the entire time. So guys, in our quiet, painful seasons, remember, God's work may be hidden, but it's never absent. He's always working behind the scenes. The next thing we need to understand is God's purpose is bigger than our pain. Now, how many guys played high school football? I know some of you did, and if you did, you know what two-a-days are. Man, two-a-days were the worst. I mean, it's hot, they're long practices. You're playing each other for 2 weeks. You don't even get to see another team. You're battling each other. Your coach thinks water's a treat, not something that your body needs to sustain it, and it's just a miserable time. But then the two-a-days are over, and the season starts. And I remember my senior year, our school hadn't won a conference championship in 30 years. But it was our year. We won it. We did it. And I promise you, when we talk about those days, we talk about the championship. We don't talk about the two-a-days and the pain that it took to get there. We just talk about the winning. And guys, that's what God has for our lives. Listen to this. It says in Romans 8:18, "For I consider the sufferings of this present time not to be worthy to be compared with the coming glory to be revealed to us." Guys, God promises us brand new bodies. He's going to destroy this earth one day and create a brand new, perfect world for us to live in. And we get to spend eternity with God. The pain and the suffering and the trials you're going through today will seem like nothing compared to the glory that we're going to receive one day. That's what God has in store for us. So we get back to Joseph now. He's still abandoned in prison, but one day Pharaoh has a dream, and nobody can interpret Pharaoh's dream. And then the man whose dream Joseph interpreted earlier remembers Joseph. And he tells Pharaoh about him. Pharaoh calls him out of prison, and Joseph's able to interpret his dream perfectly. He tells him that in your dream, you saw 7 years of prosperity, followed by 7 years of famine. And what you should do, Pharaoh, is you should appoint someone to collect extra during the prosperous years and prepare for the lean years. Pharaoh chose Joseph. So in one moment, Joseph went from prison to second in command in Egypt because he listened to God's words. And we still don't know how much time had gone by, but we know at least 13 years had gone by from being thrown in the pit to being elevated to Pharaoh's court. So we get through the 7 years of plenty, and now the famine is hitting the land. And we know that the famine extended all the way up to where his brothers lived. And they were realizing that they were going to run out of food, they were going to die, but they heard that there was grain in Egypt. If they went down there with money, they could buy some. Well, guess who they have to present themselves to in order to get the grain? They've got to present themselves to the brother that they threw in the pit over 20 years ago, and they don't even recognize Joseph when they see him, but he recognizes them. And there's more to the story. If it was me, I probably would have taken retribution on those guys. I would have thrown them in prison. I would have maybe even had them executed for what they did to me all these years. But Joseph forgave them. It says he wrapped his arms around them. You guys can read the story in Genesis. It's a great story. But he basically forgives them, and he says, God had a plan. God sent me here to preserve your life. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. And that's what Joseph did for his brothers. He saw the larger plan. Joseph saw that his suffering saved thousands of lives by God putting him in that place. So we may not see it immediately, guys, but God is weaving a purpose through our pain, and it's often bigger than we are. And the last point is, God is working in the waiting. Guys, have you ever been waiting for something? Maybe you're waiting for that promotion at work, or you're waiting to get that raise, or maybe you're waiting to have a child, and it seems like everybody else is moving forward in their positions, and you're just not. Does God even care about you? Why do I have to wait so long? Listen, Joseph's story took years to develop. He was in prison for years. He was a slave for years. He was removed from his family for over 20 years. And God was always faithful. God was always working. Remember, God's timing is often slower than our timing, but his plans are always perfect. So even if today you can't see the evidence of God's hand, trust that he's still writing your story. Guys, so back to our original question. Is God really at work in my life? And the answer is yes. He's absolutely working in your life. We see that in Joseph's story. He was working. Whether you can see it or feel it or understand it, it doesn't matter. God is still working. So even if your circumstances don't change immediately, trust that God is in the details and he has a plan for your life. Guys, it's not going to be easy, but we can do it together because God is working and we are courageous.